New and alarming coronavirus variant with an unusually high number of mutations, causing it to spread rapidly, has sparked concerns among experts around the world. This variant also showing the ability to evade immunity. Cases in South Africa, where it was first detected, on the rise. The fast-spreading variant has also been spotted in other places like Israel and Hong Kong. And Dr. Fauci says this morning, U.S. scientists will hold a meeting with South African scientists to discuss the situation. In Europe, travel restrictions are being weighed against 7 African countries, 6 of those already being added to the UK's red list. All flights from those locations suspended beginning today. And all of this comes as fears over a new variant are slamming the global financial markets, with Dow futures plummeting overnight by at least 800 points. Our reporters, correspondents, and guests are all standing by to bring us the latest. We want to begin first with CNN senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen and CNN international correspondent David McKenzie. Elizabeth, to you first. What do we need to know about this new variant that's been detected in South Africa?
So, Jessica, to take a step back for a sec, variants and mutations have been found over and over again during this pandemic. The question is which will sort of peter out and not really be important, and which will literally take over the world, like the Delta variant. We just don't know at this point, but there are reasons to be concerned about this new variant. Let's take a look at what we know. First of all, it has not been officially called a variant of concern by the WHO, so it does not have one of those Greek letters. It's just called B11529. This is the concerning part. The South African researchers found more than 30 mutations in the spike protein. The spike protein is how the virus gets into our cells. The vaccine is designed to fight it. If there are too many variations that do too many alterations in important places, that could be a problem for the vaccine. Now, the World Health Organization currently already lists 4 variants of concern and 2 variants of interest. We're hoping to hear from the World Health Organization later today on whether they've designated this one either a concern or a variant of interest. Now, CNN spoke earlier with Dr. Anthony Fauci, and he talked a bit about whether or not this variant could be a cause for concern for vaccine efficacy. Let's take a listen.
When you look at a mutation, it can give you a hint or a prediction that it might evade the immune response. What you need to do is you need to get that particular sequence of the virus, put it in a form in the lab where you can actually test the different antibodies. So you can have a prediction that it might evade, or you can actually prove it. Right now, we're getting the material together with our South African colleagues to get a situation where you could actually directly test it.
So there's a lot of work to be done to learn more about this variant. Keep in mind that back in January, there was a variant that was spotted in South Africa. It looked bad. It had a lot of mutations in all the wrong places. It did certainly do damage in South Africa and that region, but it never took to the worldwide stage like Delta. Unclear what category this new variant will be in. Jessica?
Yeah, good perspective there, Elizabeth. Thanks so much. David, turning to you now. We know there have already been restrictions implemented from some flights traveling to and from some countries in South Africa. What can you tell us more about that?
Well, Jessica, just hours after South African scientists came public, very soon after noticing this variant in genomic studies and through PCR tests, the United Kingdom was first out the gate. They banned effectively through a red list through several countries in the Southern Africa region from traveling to the United Kingdom, and citizens will have to be in mandatory quarantine. That was a very quickly enforced ban, which the South African government said seemed quite premature. But since then, other countries have followed suit, countries within the European Union. Several countries in Asia have also effectively banned travelers from the Southern Africa region to their shores. Now, the Africa CDC has come out quite strongly saying they don't recommend bans, that it, in their words, has had limited impact on the spread of variants and the virus. And in fact, it might inhibit future scientists from coming out quickly like South Africa did in announcing this variant. As Elizabeth said, there was the beta variant earlier this year. We were inside the lab as they worked very, very fast to try and figure out how that variant could evade immunity or impact the vaccines. There will be scientists in this country and around the world right now trying to figure out what this means, but it could take several days, if not weeks, to see whether these travel bans have really been put in too quickly or they are warranted. Jessica?
Right. Time will tell. All right, Elizabeth Cohen and David McKenzie, thanks so much to both of you. Here to discuss more about this, Dr. Paul Sachs, professor of medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Dr. Sachs, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate your time this morning. So we are hearing now from experts, they're concerned about the mutations. They're concerned that it could evade immunity, that it could also be more transmissible. What are your concerns as you're getting this information, and how should we be thinking about this?
Well, Jessica, you outlined two of the most important things, whether it's more transmissible, which Delta certainly was, and whether it evades the immune system, which will have implications for how effective our vaccines are. But not just our vaccines, they also has implications for monoclonal antibody treatments. There's a third issue, which is whether it causes more severe disease, and that one is actually very, very hard to determine, not just at this point, but in general. So far, the variants have not conclusively shown that the disease becomes more severe. One thing I do want to mention is that many of the cases that have been identified so far have actually been identified in people who are without symptoms, and that is encouraging. It means that maybe the vaccines are still providing protection against severe disease, even if they have allowed people to have a breakthrough case. So a lot to be learned, a lot of uncertainty at this point, but I'm really glad and very excited that the scientists have reported this and that we can get to work on it quickly.
Right, and we heard Dr. Fauci saying that now they're going to be meeting with their South African counterparts. It sounds like, based on what we're hearing, it's going to take a couple weeks to really get some of this information that you're talking about that's going to be important about how to kind of attack this variant.
Well, a couple of weeks would be on the longer end. It wouldn't surprise me if we hear a lot of information over the next week in experiments that are done, for example, in taking people who've been vaccinated and checking their blood against whether it neutralizes the virus, and other experiments that can be done in the lab. One thing that has been encouraging, as I've alluded to, is that people have been collaborating a lot internationally to try to get the latest information and the most accurate information out to people as fast as possible.
And so what do you think about these travel bans that are being in place? We just heard from David talking about how there is some concern that maybe these were put in too quickly, or perhaps they were put in at just the right time. How do you think that those travel bans play into the spread of this, and do you feel like that's the right action to take right now?
So travel bans so far have had a very limited effect on spread of the virus globally, except in certain isolated countries, island countries, such as New Zealand. In general, what has happened is that the virus has already spread at the time that it's been discovered. So whether this has any impact or not it's really too soon to say.
And do you think, I mean, is there a chance that it is here in America at this point? I guess we may not know right now, but it's certainly possible.
Well, we don't know. It is possible. One thing that is potentially going to give us information relatively soon is that, unlike the more complete sequencing, which can take a while, some of the signatures of this particular virus might have clues on the PCR tests that are done by certain PCR machines. And I know that the people I've communicated with, virologists, say that we should be able to tell relatively soon whether it's circulating widely here. I suspect it isn't, because the only place it's circulating widely so far has been in southern Africa. But at least we'll be able to find out, is there a signal of early cases?
Right. More information is always good in this situation. In terms of the vaccine, before I let you go, obviously boosters right now open to all adults. It would seem to me this just underscores go get the booster. Is that the correct medical advice at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress that enough. One of the things that's been really encouraging about looking at the booster data is that we're seeing that people who've received a third dose of the vaccines have very high antibody titers, higher even than people who've had COVID-19 and recovered. And so this is clearly the best way to be protected. It is conceivable, despite all the mutations that have been mentioned, that people who have received their booster are still protected from this virus, and I'm hopeful that that's the case. And even if it does escape the immune system to a certain extent, it's very likely that the vaccines will still prevent severe disease, because remember, our immune system is much more complicated than antibodies. It also includes cellular immunity.
Right. All right, Dr. Paul Sachs, thanks so much for your insight. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks,
and
Jessica.
right now, Right now, Dow futures are down more than 800 points. Oil has dropped more than 5%, and global markets are rattled over fears of this new COVID-19 variant. I want to bring in CNN chief business correspondent Christine Romans, who's been following this. Christine, what should we expect today ahead of the opening bell?
I mean, you're going to get a big sell-off here. Markets don't like uncertainty, and the conventional wisdom was that the U.S. economy was roaring ahead heading into the end of the year, and that countries were dealing with COVID, and we were working ahead on vaccination rates. And now we have this new variant with a lot of uncertainties. We don't know if it evades immunity. We don't know if it's easily transmissible, and there's alarm among scientists, and that is triggering alarm among global markets. You can see that European stocks down sharply, Asian shares closed down sharply as well, and stock index futures are leaning lower here. A 2% move is a pretty big move for the opening, so we'll see if it holds. I will tell you this, Jessica, there are a few people this morning telling me that they feel like it might be a bit of an overreaction in quiet holiday markets, at least in the United States. There's just so much that we don't know here. You've got a rush out of the stock market into the bond market, out of oil futures. Oil prices are falling. The idea being that if you have this new variant, you could have travel shutdowns in the future, and that could dampen demand for oil and oil products. So that could mean, in the near term, maybe a lid on gasoline prices here in the U.S. But just an awful lot of uncertainty, and a reminder that COVID is still a big driver in market psychology here.
Yeah, no question about that. All right, Christine Romans, thanks so much.